Now that we've seen vector displacement brushes, let's take a look at 3D alphas. 3D alphas are created by taking any 3D object in Zbrush, orienting it on screen, and then there's two ways that we can create them. We can go to the B for brush, C for chisel, and let's select chisel rectangle. Now you see the chisel rectangle has a variety of three-dimensional objects loaded into it. We're going to add this object. So I will go to brush, and then once again I will click from mesh. Now because this was not sculpted from a plane, Zbrush will recognize that and create a 3D alpha from it. So we do that, and then you see that it will add this object here into this chisel rectangle brush. So let's go ahead and create another polystar. So let's go ahead and create a polystar. Let's change this polystar into a polysphere by clicking the gear icon. And now we want to go ahead and divide it a few times. So let's give it some subdivisions so we have enough geometry to support the shape that we're going to try and make. So here we've divided it up to 5 million polygons. I'll select that 3D alpha tool and then click and drag, and you see that it adds that three-dimensional object as an alpha here. Now, if we wanted to store it the other way, I'll select the object, orient it on screen. Let's go ahead and snap back to the front view here. And I'll rotate this 90 degrees, so we're looking straight down at it. We can go to the alpha menu. In the alpha menu, I have to mesh and from mesh. I will click from mesh, and that's going to open up this preview window where I can actually rotate and change the orientation at which this is stored. Click OK. And now I have stored this alpha. Now if I go to alpha, from mesh, I can change that orientation like this. I can also change the resolution of the alpha. I could make it 1024, for example, if I want to. Click OK. Now you see that that orientation has changed. So if I draw this now, it draws at a different orientation. Now if I go back to my brush and I click to mesh, that will convert that alpha to a mesh. So I can actually change the shape by baking it back down into a mesh. So let's go back to our first alpha here, go to alpha to mesh, and there you see we have updated that to a mesh. Now 3D alphas differ from vector displacement maps. As you can see, they are various shades of gray. The lightest rings are the ones that come furthest forward. Slightly darker gray are those teeth, those spokes on the inside. These do not displace around a curve, around a compound curve. They can only press in and out. So I find these quite useful for mechanical bits and bobs. If we go back to our polysphere, you can see that this chisel rectangle brush has quite a few of these types of meshes stored in it. There we have one. This is a nice sort of valve cover there. Once again, another piece. These are very, very similar to the mesh insert brushes, but they are alphas. They are deforming the surface of the mesh. So there may be instances where you elect to use these instead of doing a mesh insert brush. However, you can always do a mesh insert brush and then retopologize them together. It's purely down to what you find the most convenient for your particular use. If we scroll back here, you see we've got several of these available, various gears and gear teeth. All quite nice, but they do require that the mesh be subdivided up quite high. In this case, we're at 5 million polygons, so it can represent the hard angles and the density of the model that we're trying to create. So those are 3D alphas. Just to recap, you can create them two ways. If you go to alpha from mesh, that will give you the option to change the orientation before you store it. And then if you go to brush from mesh, it will not give you the orientation option, but it will create the 3D alpha. So if I click from mesh, give it a moment to think, and then you'll see it has added it on to the end of this brush here. So if I click that, click and drag, it will add that same object to itself. So that is 3D alphas. I find that usually I end up using mesh insert brushes, but there have been instances where 3D alphas have been nice to go in and add extra little bits and pieces. You can use it in conjunction with Dynamesh, or you can use it in conjunction with remeshing to get the best possible outcome. It's just another method of taking 3D objects, turning them into an alpha and a specialized brush that you can then use on your surface. So before we move on, I want to talk about one more thing that you can do with alphas that may have been overlooked. It's actually been in ZBrush for quite some time, but a lot of people aren't aware of it. If I go back to my alpha menu here and let's select, let's say for example, this 3D alpha here we created earlier. I'll go over here and select a polymesh star. Then I'll go to the alpha menu, and if you go to Make 3D, there's a button here called Make 3D. And what that does is it actually generates geometry based on this alpha. Now that's different from 2Mesh, which will create a polyplane that has the alpha on it. So if I click 2Mesh, you see that that creates the alpha coming out of a polygon plane. However, if I go to Alpha, Make 3D, it will generate a 3D object based on that alpha. However, obviously the resolution is poor. So I'll go to Alpha, and under Make 3D, I can adjust my mesh resolution. We'll turn that up quite high. And we can adjust our depth as well. Click Make 3D, and the higher our resolution is set, the better the resulting geometry will be. So this might take a little bit of time because we raised that resolution slider up quite high. This predates things like Shadowbox, which is a method of generating meshes based on masking. It predates Dynamesh, predates quite a bit of things in ZBrush. It has been part of the program for many, many years. Here you go. There's the 3D object that we just generated from that alpha. So this will work for any alpha at all. If I come over here and select, let's say, the arrow, and then go to Alpha, Make 3D, it will repeat that process, and this time it's going to create a 3D mesh based on that alpha. And again, there are other ways that we can accomplish things like this, but in terms of being quick and easy to access, I find this really, really nice. If I need to generate a very, very quick geometric shape, I can use my alphas to do just that. Here you see we have a three-dimensional object created from that alpha. So that completes this look at Alpha 3D. Hopefully you found this useful and you can see ways that you can incorporate this into your own workflow. I think the combination of storing 3D alphas and vector displacement brushes are really powerful, and they're things that I find myself using constantly when I'm concepting in ZBrush. There's very few problems that can't be solved using either a combination of those two brushes or one on its own. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next chapter.